Groundbreaking today near the steps of the civil courthouse downtown. A statue is being placed there to commemorate the hundreds of slaves who tried to earn their freedom in the St. Louis courts in the decades before the Civil War. Those gathered there today say it's high time the efforts of those slaves, their attorneys, and the courts were honored for their part in history. That statue should be installed around October.
But wondering why you haven't heard more about this in history class? Well, Lauren Traeger details what these freedom lawsuits were and what they mean to who we are now.
The Dred Scott case actually started with a trial here in our court here in the city of St. Louis.
You've probably seen this statue, Dred and Harriet Scott, outside the old courthouse in St. Louis.
If you ever read the Dred Scott opinion from the first word to the last, you will get angry.
The case, a devastating edict of the Supreme Court that Judge David C. Mason says turned the tide towards civil war.
That gave the Supreme Court the seal of approval to every racist thought you could imagine. All right? That was never undone.
But the Scotts were far from alone.
We were sort of an epicenter of slaves suing for their freedom.
In the mid-1800s, slavery was legal in Missouri, but many freed slaves lived and worked here.
Essentially, if a slave owner took their slave into a free state long enough to establish residency, whatever that state does into establishing residency, at that moment, that slave became free. And under Missouri's once free, always free rule, you bring them back under enslavement, you're violating their rights. They have the right to be free. And that's what they went to court on.
Over the course of decades leading up to the Civil War, nearly 320 slaves sued to prove their freedom in St. Louis's courts, often at great risk.
They're beat, they're giving horrible work, denied food, perhaps even killed off. The word was that if you lose, the master's going to sell you down the river to the plantations in Louisiana and Mississippi. That's where the phrase being sold down the river comes from.
But in front of all white male juries, often with judges protecting them, many of the slaves actually won.
You got to respect that. You got to honor that, because nobody else was doing it to the degree that we were doing it in our courts here, not even close.
In about 2005, there were all these documents.
The stories of the freedom suits had largely been untold until the documents in St. Louis were discovered in the 2000s.
Literally cleaning out those files in the basement of the Globe Democrat building.
And ever since, a collaboration to commemorate, Mason joining many others to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for a statue at the steps of the Civil Courts building. It will tell the story of enslaved people working just outside the courthouse, while inside, justice was at work. A female slave on the stand testifying for her freedom.
It showed a very intense commitment to the rule of law.
Mason says it honors the past, but is a reminder for the future that justice and equality is for all.
And I think it's going to be something that the St. Louis citizens can be proud of.
The names of the more than 300 slaves who sued for their freedom in St. Louis will be on that statue, we're told. Most of them were women who were fighting for their children to also be free. The organizers hoping to find some of the descendants of the freed and enslaved people involved in those suits. You can learn a lot more about the freedom suits and about the donors who made all of this possible by heading over to KMOV.com. I'm Lauren Traeger, News 4.